Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into the life, the really extraordinary life, of a figure who, gosh, a century ago, just dared to declare a black God and a black Christ.
Yeah, I mean, think about the audacity of that back then.
Exactly. And not just that, he actively envisioned, really campaigned for a United States of Africa. We are
Yeah.
talking about Marcus Garvey.
A leader, incredibly influential, but also, often misunderstood.
Mhm.
His ideas, though, they still spark so much debate today.
Absolutely. And that's our mission here, isn't it? To give you a kind of shortcut to being genuinely well-informed about Garvey. We want to get past the easy labels.
Right. We've dug into some really compelling sources for this. We've got E. David Cronin's big work, Black Moses, which is kind of foundational.
Like classic.
Definitely. But also, crucially, we have his widow's perspective, Amy Jacques Garvey's Garvey and Garveyism. Super important insight there.
Oh, vital. And of course, we're drawing straight from the man himself, his philosophy and opinions and his speeches and writings.
So you get it straight from the source.
So our focus is really unpacking Marcus Garvey and his huge organization, the Universal Negro Improvement Association, the UNIA. People called him a Black Moses, and you can see why. He got millions fired up, didn't he?
He really did. All over the world with this powerful message of Black nationalism, African redemption.
And this isn't just, dry history. It's a story of massive ambition, this intense search for racial identity when the world was actively denying it, and just a relentless fight for freedom against, well, enormous prejudice.
It's a story of ambition, identity, power, struggle.
Hmm.
It's got everything.
So let's dive in. Okay, let's start right at the beginning. Marcus Garvey's origins in Jamaica. He was born in St. Ann's Bay, 1887. And his early life, well, it really sets the stage.
It really does. He started work super young as a printer's apprentice while still in school, believe it or not.
Yeah.
And what's really striking is by age 14, he was already managing men in the print shop.
Mm-hmm.
He clearly had some natural leadership ability even then.
14. That's incredible. But here's something that always surprises me. He said himself he wasn't really aware of deep racial prejudice until about that age.
Yeah, it's fascinating. He talked about growing up, playing with white kids, not feeling any real difference, not hearing Negro used as a slur until he was like 14.
Which is interesting given the context of Jamaica at the time. It wasn't simple, was it, that racial hierarchy?
Not at all. It was deeply complex. You had this mix of English class traditions and race. Whites at the top, naturally, then mulattoes, people of mixed heritage, kind of in the middle, and then the vast majority, Black Jamaicans at the bottom.
Right.
And Garvey observed and felt something really specific here. He noticed that it was often the lightest of the mixed bloods who showed the most intense prejudice against darker-skinned Black people.
That internal dynamic.
Exactly. And this wasn't just an observation. It bred in him a real distrust for any but the darkest-skinned Negroes. It hit him personally. He saw how this fractured the community, how it added to that feeling of hopelessness among Black Jamaicans. It wasn't just about white oppression from outside.
That's a really crucial insight into his later focus on unity. So these early experiences, they weren't just eye-opening, they pushed him towards action. He led a strike in Kingston.
Yeah, his first taste of organizing, seeing the power dynamics, the exploitation. But his travels abroad, that really solidified things. Costa Rica, especially.
What happened there?
He saw just brutal exploitation of Black field workers, just terrible conditions. And what really got to him was the complete indifference, the nonchalant indifference, as the sources put it, of the British officials who were supposed to protect them.
Just didn't care.
Didn't seem to. And that led him to this really stark conclusion, something he carried with him. No white person would ever regard the life of a Black man equal to that of a white man. Just a gut-wrenching realization based on what he saw.
Wow. And London, too, right? That was another key stop.
Hugely influential. It wasn't just the obvious racism, but the subtle stuff, the insidious color bar, even in England, the heart of the empire. This really pushed him to learn more about Africa, its cultures, its history, and how it was being run, or rather ruled, by colonial powers.
And then comes that pivotal moment, the Black Moses revelation, on the ship back to Jamaica.
Yes, 1914. He'd been reading Booker T. Washington's Up from Slavery, and he described this moment like, my brain was afire. Just this sudden, intense vision.
What was the vision?
Uniting all the Negro peoples of the world into one great body to establish a country and government absolutely their own. It was huge, global.
And he asked those questions.
Those haunting questions.
Yeah.
Where is the Black man's government? Where is his king and his kingdom? You can feel the yearning in that. And then his resolution. I will help to make them.
Chills. That's not just an idea, that's a mission statement for life.
Absolutely. Forged right there on that ship.
And when he got back to Jamaica, he faced pushback, right? Especially from some lighter-skinned Jamaicans.
Oh, yeah. Open hostility, persecution even, from some colored men, as they were termed, who wanted to distance themselves from black identity, who wanted to pass as white if they could.
But Garvey doubled down.
He did. He chose to defend and help the black millions, knowing it would mean suffering. He put his own money, hundreds of pounds, into getting his organization started. He knew, even with some influential white friends, this fight was largely going to be his own.
Okay, so that's the foundation. Now, shift gears to America. Post-World War I, this is where his movement just explodes, right?
Completely. The timing and the place were just perfect. In a grim sort of way, you had the Great Migration happening, millions of black Americans moving north.
Changing the whole landscape of cities.
Dramatically.
Yeah.
Think about Gary. Indiana, its black population shot up by 1,200% between 1910 and 1920.
Yeah.
1,200. Chicago, almost 150% increase in the same time. Compare that to only 21% growth for the white population there.
Huge demographic shifts, and that created problems.
Big problems. These new arrivals, often coming from rural agricultural backgrounds in the South, they just weren't prepared for urban industrial life. And the North wasn't the promised land they'd hoped for.
How so?
While any initial feeling of less overt racism quickly wore off, they found themselves still second-class citizens, crammed into black ghettos. And when the wartime jobs dried up—
last hired, first fired.
the classic story. So massive economic hardship piled on top of crushed hopes. Deep, deep disillusionment set in.
And it wasn't just economic frustration boiling over, was it? There was violence.
Terrible violence. The Red Summer of 1919. It wasn't just one or two incidents. The sources list 26 major race riots, white mobs attacking black communities in cities all over Houston, East St. Louis, D.C., Chicago.
Just horrific.
But something shifted then. In those riots, black people started fighting back, defending themselves, their communities, in a way they hadn't really done before on that scale. It was a sign of a new mood, a new militancy.
A rejection of just taking it anymore.
Exactly. And right alongside this, you have the horrifying rebirth and spread of the Ku Klux Klan.
Not just in the South this time.
No, that's key. They were showing up in 27 states, New England, New York, the Midwest. This wasn't some fringe Southern thing anymore. It was national. And their message of violent white supremacy, it just shook the faith of Negroes in their future as American citizens. How could it not?
It's hard to imagine the fear and uncertainty. This must have fundamentally changed how black people saw their situation.
It absolutely did. It directly challenged those older strategies for racial uplift, the ones focused on gradualism and accommodation. People started asking, is this working? Can it ever work?
And this is where the idea of the new Negro comes in.
Precisely. This environment fostered a different kind of black consciousness, more assertive, more militant, someone who openly rejected Booker T. Washington's call for patience and moderation.
They weren't willing to wait.
No way. And you saw this reflected in a new radical black press emerging, especially in places like Harlem. Papers like The Messenger, The Voice, The Crusader. They weren't just reporting injustice, they were criticizing, analyzing, sometimes even calling for forceful action. They were giving voice to this new spirit, even if their circulation wasn't massive yet.
So pull it all together for us. Why was this specific moment, this post-WWI America, such fertile ground for Garvey?
Okay, look. You've got intensified race riots and violence, crushing economic hardship, the hope of the North turning sour, the KKK spreading fear, and this rising tide of black militancy, the new Negro, looking for answers. It created this desperate, urgent need for something new, something transformative.
A vacuum almost.
A huge vacuum. And into that steps Marcus Garvey with the UNIA. His message, uncompromising racial pride, forget waiting for charity, build your own economic power, look to Africa for redemption. It spoke directly to those feelings of frustration, anger, and yearning. It offered a powerful, compelling alternative.
It wasn't just talk, it was a plan, a vision.
A grand vision. And that's why the UNIA became, as the sources say, the first true mass movement among Negroes in the United States. He tapped into something incredibly deep. It wasn't just a movement. It felt like an answer to an existential crisis.
Okay, so let's get into the heart of Garveyism itself. He arrives in the U.S. in 1916, hoping to meet Booker T. Washington, who sadly had just died. But he sees the potential in America, right?
Immediately, especially in Harlem. He sets up the UNIA's New York division in 1917, and Harlem just becomes this perfect incubator.
And the growth was Staggering.
Absolutely explosive. Between 1919 and 1920, it just took off. Garvey himself was claiming, maybe optimistically, 2 million members by mid-1919, then later 6 million worldwide.
6 million. Are those numbers reliable?
Well, they're debated. More conservative estimates put membership in the tens of thousands in big cities like 30,000 in New York, maybe
Yeah.
9,000 in Chicago, thousands more elsewhere. But even those numbers are huge for the time. What's undeniable is that large numbers of Negroes were listening with ever-increasing interest.
He was definitely reaching people.
Massively. The sources confirmed the UNIA raised more money and claimed a larger membership than any other Negro group, either before or since. Think about that. And that anecdote about the King of Swaziland, knowing only 2 black Westerners, Garvey and Jack Johnson, the boxer.
That says it all about his global profile.
It really does. It wasn't just an American phenomenon.
So what was the core purpose? What was the UNIA actually about?
At its heart, it was about unity. Drawing the peoples of the race together, promoting race, pride, and love, which was radical in itself back then, and the ultimate goal, establishing a central nation for the race.
Back to Africa.
Essentially, yes, it wasn't just about improving conditions in America, it was global self-determination. His motto captured it perfectly. One God, one aim, one destiny.
Powerful stuff. Okay, let's break down the key ideas, the pillars, and we have to start with maybe the most controversial one, racial purity and separation.
Yeah, this is tough for a lot of people to grapple with, then and now. Garvey argued it was essential for the salvation and advancement of the black race. He flat out said he believed in a pure black race, just as how all self-respecting whites believe in a pure white race.
Strong words.
Very strong. And he was vehemently against miscegenation and race suicide, as he termed interracial relationships.
Which sounds uncomfortably close to segregationist ideas, even if the goal was different. How did that work within the UNIA itself, given the diversity of black people?
That's the fascinating tension, isn't it? On one hand, this strong rhetoric about a pure black race, echoing, ironically, some white supremacist ideas of the time, though aimed at liberation. But on the other hand, to build that mass movement, the UNIA had to be pragmatic.
So they let everyone in?
They welcomed all shades of Negroes, blacks, mulattoes, and yellows. The official line within the organization was, every Negro racially is just alike, everyone gets an equal chance.
But his rhetoric sometimes targeted lighter-skinned people.
Yes, and that caused friction, definitely. His anti-mulatto comments, maybe meant to boost the morale of darker-skinned members or challenge internal colorism, didn't always land well, especially in the U.S., where those lines, while real, were maybe less rigid than in parts of the Caribbean. It shows that balancing act between his ideal and the reality of building a unified movement.
A complex balancing act. Okay, moving on. Self-help and self-reliance. This seems absolutely central.
Cornerstone.
Yeah.
Absolute fundamental. Garvey was adamant. Black people must help themselves, lift ourselves up. He warned constantly against relying on white charity.
Why was he so against philanthropy?
He saw it as potentially controlling, a way to keep black people dependent. He famously said, the Negro must save himself or be forever lost. Economic independence wasn't just about money. It was the foundation for political self-determination, for earning respect on the world stage. Build your own businesses, your own industries. That was the path to power.
The higher industrialization of the Negro, as he put it.
Exactly. Get the economic engine going first.
And how did he view existing economic systems, like capitalism or socialism?
It was nuanced. He saw capitalism as necessary, but he didn't trust huge concentrations of private wealth. He thought maybe the state should control resources beyond a certain limit, with the people's consent, to stop individuals from hoarding or causing conflict.
Interesting. And unions, communism.
He was wary. He cautioned black workers about white trade unionism, fearing it could be a trap, controlled by white interests. Same with the present brand of communism. He saw both as potential distractions from the main goal, black nationalism and racial uplift.
Why distract?
He thought they could be used by whites, capitalists, or communists to manipulate black people, to use their labor or their numbers for goals that weren't fundamentally about black liberation. He even said black people didn't need socialism because all of us are laborers anyway. Race first, always.
Always back to race. Okay, let's talk about religion and history. His use of a black God and black Christ that must have been revolutionary.
Hugely revolutionary. Think about the psychological impact. For centuries, black people have been shown images of a white God, a white Jesus. Garvey flipped that script entirely.
What was the goal?
To rebuild racial self-respect, instill pride in Negro heritage. It was like a spiritual injection of self-worth. He and his followers constantly drew parallels between their struggle and the Bible, especially the Exodus story.
The Black Moses leading his people.
Exactly. They sang hymns about God leading them like the Israelites. They saw themselves in this great crusade, divinely inspired, connected to African redemption.
And he even compared his movement's potential suffering to Christ's crucifixion.
He did. That quote is so powerful. You cannot crucify a principle. You cannot nail the souls of men to a cross. You cannot imprison it. You cannot bury it. He was saying the idea, the spirit, was bigger than him, bigger than any persecution. It was unstoppable, like Christianity itself.
Wow. And tied into this was Ethiopianism. What was that about?
It comes from a line in the Bible, Psalms. Ethiopia shall stretch forth her hand unto God. Ethiopia was incredibly symbolic.
Because it was never colonized.
Exactly. An ancient African kingdom that had resisted European conquest. It stood as this powerful beacon of Black sovereignty, Black pride, Black history. So that verse wasn't just scripture. It was seen as a prophecy, a promise of future Black empowerment, of African redemption, maybe even divinely ordained. This spiritual dimension was absolutely key to the movement's appeal. It offered hope, destiny.
So all these pillars, race pride, self-help, the spiritual reinterpretation, they all point towards the ultimate goal.
Pan-Africanism and African redemption. That was the end game.
His argument was that Black people in the West, after centuries of suffering,
Having suffered, bled, and died here, should now turn their eyes towards Africa, our ancestral home, and not just look, but actively work to free it from the thraldom of alien oppression and exploitation. He stressed this shared destiny, this oneness of interest with Native Africans against colonialism.
And the vision was a unified Africa, a Negro empire.
That was the grand dream. A great nation in Africa, a Negro empire, the United States of Africa. He believed that only through this kind of unity and self-governance on their ancestral continent could the Black man's place in the world be secured for all times.
He wasn't thinking small.
Never. And this wasn't just talk. The UNIA set up branches everywhere, West Indies, Central America, attempts in Africa. He even petitioned the League of Nations after World War I, asking for control over the former German colonies in Africa to start building this nation. It shows how serious, how internationally ambitious this project really was. #tag Garvey's methods and controversial alliances.
Okay, so the vision was huge. How did he actually do it? How did he mobilize so many people? You mentioned his speeches.
His oratory was legendary. The sources call it a peculiar gift, this mix of bombast and stirring heroics. He just knew how to connect.
How? What was the magic?
He voiced the things people felt, but maybe couldn't articulate the secret thoughts of the Negro world, the frustration, the desire for dignity. And crucially, he told them what they most wanted to hear, that a Black skin was not a badge of shame, but rather a glorious symbol of national greatness.
Flipping the script again.
Completely. He promised this incredible future, a Negro nation in the African homeland that would be the marvel of the modern world. And somehow, he made people who'd been treated like nobodies feel like somebody. That call, "Up you mighty race, you can accomplish what you will," it became iconic.
And he did this without notes, just memorized outline.
Yeah, apparently he taught himself public speaking through trial and humiliation, just getting up and doing it. He couldn't speak for detailed notes, just outlines, which probably contributed to that passionate, fluid, almost hypnotic style people described.
Beyond the speeches, he really understood spectacle, didn't he? That 1920 convention in New York sounds amazing.
Oh, it was designed to be. A mammoth international convention. Delegates supposedly representing the entire race. It wasn't just meetings, it was theater in a way. Deeply moving religious services, then this silent, powerful march through Harlem.
With the uniforms.
Yes. Thousands of UNIA members, the African Legion in their military-style uniforms, the Black Cross nurses. Imagine the visual impact this display of organized, disciplined, Black pride and potential power. It was incredibly potent symbolism.
And they formalized things there. The colors, his title.
They did. Red, black, and green became the official colors. Red for the shared blood, black for racial pride, green for hope and new life in Africa. And Garvey was officially named Provisional President of the African Republic.
Provisional President, that's bold.
Incredibly bold. It stated the ambition right there.
And they adopted that Declaration of Rights, too. What was significant about that?
It was a comprehensive statement. It demanded political and judicial equality, sure, but also complete racial self-determination and a free Africa under Black rule. And that specific detail demanding the word Negro be capitalized.
Which seems small now, but wasn't then.
Not at all. It was a direct assertion of dignity, of personhood, and the fact that major papers like the New York Times eventually adopted it shows the influence Garveyism had, even on the establishment.
How did they spread these ideas? The newspaper, the Negro World.
That was Absolutely crucial. Launched in 1918, it was the UNIA's main propaganda tool. Garvey's editorials, news from branches worldwide, constantly hammering home the message, Africa must be redeemed.
And it reached far beyond the U.S.
Oh yes, they printed it in French and Spanish too. Its reach was global. And its message was so nationalistic, so anti-colonial, that colonial governments everywhere saw it as a huge threat.
Banned it.
Widely banned. It was cited as dangerous. Possessing it could get you serious prison time, 5 years, life, even death in French Dahomey, according to the sources. That tells you how powerful they thought his words were.
Wow. Okay, now let's get into his critiques. He wasn't shy about criticizing other black leaders, was he?
Not at all. He arrived in the U.S. in 1916 and was apparently shocked. He saw these so-called Negro leaders as having no program, just being mere opportunists.
Living off the people.
That was his charge, living off their leadership status while the poor people were groping in the dark. He felt they weren't offering real solutions.
And he had a particular suspicion of lighter-skinned leaders and those relying on white money.
A deep suspicion. He called those dependent on white philanthropists the most dangerous member of our society. He worried their loyalty was ultimately to their benefactors, that they'd turn back the clock of progress if asked.
Because he saw white charity as a tool.
Often, yes, a deceptive tool to maintain control, to prevent real black independence. He questioned the long-term reliability of it. Would the next generation of white philanthropists be as supportive? He doubted it. He thought ultimately white people would prioritize their own, leaving black people behind. This is a pretty cynical view, born of his experiences.
And the black press didn't escape his criticism either.
No, he had a very dim view of most of it. Called it venal, ignorant, and corrupt. Accused them of lacking a constructive policy, chasing circulation with sensationalism, crime stories, scandals, instead of focusing on racial uplift.
He even accused them of downplaying the word Negro.
Yeah. He claimed they entered into a conspiracy to taboo the term Negro and popularize the term colored. He saw this as part of an effort by lighter-skinned elites to distance themselves from the masses. He saw many editors as just crooks and defamers, totally unlike his own purposeful Negro World.
Okay, this leads us to perhaps the most shocking part for many today. His engagement with the Ku Klux Klan. How on earth did he justify meeting with KKK officials?
It's jarring, isn't it? His defense was pure pragmatism, as he saw it. He argued the KKK, horrifying as they were, represented the invisible government of the United States, the true spiritual feeling of white America.
More honest than others.
That was his controversial argument. He felt they were more honest about white racial attitudes than the hypocritical whites, who might pretend tolerance but secretly held racist views.
And he saw a shared goal. That sounds dangerous.
Extremely controversial. He argued that while the Klan wanted America to be a white man's country, the UNIA wanted Africa to be a black man's country. In that specific sense, the goal of racial separation and purity, he saw a similar aim, even if the motivations and endgames were totally different. He advocated race purity for both races, even saying UNIA members marrying whites would be expelled.
But surely this caused outrage, alienated people.
Huge outrage. It gave his critics massive ammunition. His widow, Amy Jacques Garvey, tried to frame it later as expediency, confronting the ugly reality of white supremacy head-on, not agreeing with it.
And some in the UNIA saw a strategic benefit.
Incredibly, yes. Bishop McGuire, the UNIA's religious head, apparently stated, quite frankly, that the Klan's violence would actually help the UNIA by scaring black people into the movement, looking for protection and an alternative, a really stark, brutal kind of pragmatism.
And this aligns with his reaction to President Harding's speech, the one calling for racial separation.
It does. Harding gave that speech in Birmingham in 1921, saying racial amalgamation there cannot be. And Garvey immediately sent a telegram congratulating Harding, thanking him on behalf of 400 million Negroes for this splendid interpretation, and stating flatly, all true Negroes are against social equality.
Wow. That's a statement.
A hugely controversial statement, and one that haunted him. For many black leaders fighting for integration and equality in America, this looked like a complete betrayal. It became a major point of attack against him.
All right, let's pivot now to how this massive movement began to unravel. The Black Star Line, it started with such hope, didn't it?
Immense hope. It was meant to be more than just ships. Garvey called it a small attempt to fit and prepare ourselves for the bigger effort towards self-reliance. It was the economic heart, the visible proof of black capability.
A powerful symbol.
Hugely powerful. People poured their savings into it, $5 a share. They collected something like $800,000, which was a fortune
Yeah.
back then, especially coming from working-class black people.
But the reality was
Tragically different. The sources point to just terrible business decisions. Buying decrepit, old ships that were barely functional, often at inflated prices. The losses were huge. By January 1922, the company had a cash balance of, wait for it, $31.12.
$31 after raising $800,000.
$31.12. It's almost unbelievable. It speaks volumes about the chaos, the mismanagement, maybe worse.
And Garvey blamed betrayal, too. Robberies from within and without.
He certainly did. There was an instance where $25,000 was paid for a ship they never even got. Another $11,000 lost to fraud. He felt subordinates betrayed him. And some officers apparently ran up huge debts without anyone knowing. Sounds like financial anarchy.
Can you give us examples of the ship problems? They sound almost comical if they weren't so disastrous.
Right. The Yarmouth had a crew that apparently drank the whiskey cargo they were supposed to sell, leading to a $6,000 judgment against the company.
Oh.
Then the Kanawha, this old yacht, was so problematic, Garvey himself had to sign on as purser for a trip just to get it back into the U.S. without immigration hassles, because the State Department already had eyes on him as a dangerous alien.
Imagine the indignity.
And the Orion, they lost a $10,000 deposit before finally getting the ship. Just one problem after another. But the absolute killer, the thing that brought the feds down on him, was the Phyllis Wheatley.
What was wrong with that one?
It didn't exist. It was a mythical vessel. They were selling tickets, taking money, for a ship that was purely imaginary.
You're kidding. Selling tickets for a ghost ship?
Apparently so. Whether it was desperation or delusion or outright fraud at some level, that's what happened. And that act, selling shares and passage for a non-existent ship through the mail, that was the basis for the mail fraud charges.
The charges that ultimately took him down in the U.S., he was arrested in January 1922.
Yes, indicted for using the mails to defraud. Garvey, of course, insisted it was a complete frame-up, a conspiracy by his enemies, business rivals, political opponents, maybe even the government, to silence him.
And the trial itself was problematic.
Very. It started May 1923, and Garvey made what everyone agrees was a disastrous choice. He fired his lawyer, a capable black attorney named McGoogled, because he suspected conspiracies everywhere.
And defended himself.
Defended himself. Banking on his own eloquence. Maybe his ego got the better of him. Big mistake in a complex federal trial.
And the judge. There were issues there, too.
Judge Julian Mack. He was openly a member of the NAACP, which was actively fighting Garvey. Garvey tried to get him disqualified for bias, but the request was denied. So you have a potentially biased judge and Garvey acting as his own lawyer. Not a good setup.
How did the prosecution make its case?
Prosecutor Maddock brought in lots of witnesses, former employees, stockholders who had lost everything. They laid out the extremely informal bookkeeping, the general chaos of the Black Star Line's finances. The government accountant testified about the huge sums of money just gone. That $31 cash balance was pretty damning evidence.
So what was the final verdict?
Guilty. But here's the thing. Despite evidence suggesting much of the loss was due to bad deals, maybe even being swindled by white sailors unloading junk ships, Garvey was convicted on just one specific count related to sending an empty envelope to this guy, Benny Dancy, connected to the non-existent Phyllis Wheatley stock.
Just one count?
Yeah.
And he got the maximum sentence.
Maximum, 5 years in federal prison plus a $1,000 fine. To Garvey and his millions of followers, this absolutely proved it was a frame-up to stop the movement. Even some white newspapers at the time questioned if the sentence was excessive compared to white defendants in similar cases.
And the appeals failed.
All failed. Appeal rejected 1925. Supreme Court refused to hear the case. He went to Atlanta Penitentiary in February 1925.
Did he stop fighting from prison?
Not Garvey. He remained indomitable. Writing, sending messages, framing himself as a political prisoner,
Yeah.
He kept applying for a pardon, arguing racial bias, conspiracy by the judge, prosecutor, rival groups like the NAACP.
Did he get?
Sort of. President Coolidge commuted his sentence in December 1927, meaning he was released early. But there was a catch.
Deportation.
Immediate deportation. As a convicted alien felon, he was put on a ship straight back to Jamaica. He wasn't even allowed to stop by UNIA headquarters in New York. That cut him off completely from his main power base in the U.S., a devastating blow.
And it wasn't just the government. Other black leaders actively campaigned against him, right? The Garvey Must Go campaign.
Yes, that was incredibly bitter. January 1923, this committee of 8 prominent figures like A. Philip Randolph, Robert Abbott of the Chicago Defender, they wrote an open letter to the Attorney General demanding Garvey be prosecuted quickly.
Black leaders asking the government to prosecute another black leader.
Unprecedented, really. They called Garvey an unscrupulous demagogue, accused him of stirring up ill feeling between the races, and basically begged the government to disband and extirpate this vicious movement. It shows just how deep the divisions were.
How did Garvey react to that?
Oh, furiously. Called it the greatest bit of treachery and wickedness. Labeled his critics traitors, selfish grafters, motivated by pure jealousy. And he went personal, didn't he?
The colorism accusations again.
Right back to it. Claimed most of them were octoroons and quadroons, or married to them, implying they opposed him because they wanted social equality and assimilation with whites, not true black uplift. Really divisive stuff.
And the black press largely sided against him.
The majority was hostile. They played up scandals, especially around his messy divorce, the Black Star Line failures, the fraud charges. It all fit this narrative that he was a faker, incompetent. It reinforced that crab-in-the-barrel thing, rivals happy to see him fall. Abbott, the editor who signed the letter, even sued Garvey for libel and won a default judgment. It was relentless.
The opposition was coming from all sides, even internationally. Liberia turning against him was a huge blow to the back-to-Africa dream.
Massive blow. Initially, Liberia seemed open to the idea. Garvey sent people, got some assurances, but then things soured.
Why?
The UNIA mission seemed disorganized, there was internal fighting, and always that chronic shortage of funds. The Liberian government got nervous. Secretary of State Barclay publicly stated Garvey's movement does not meet with the endorsement anymore. They started confiscating UNIA supplies, blocking passports for anyone linked to Garvey. The door slammed shut.
Was it just the UNIA's issues, or was there outside pressure?
Garvey certainly believed there was outside pressure. He argued Britain and France, the big colonial powers surrounding Liberia, were terrified of his Pan-African nationalism. They protested UNIA activities, and Liberia, being small and vulnerable, got scared.
Feared being absorbed or punished.
Plausibly. Garvey claimed the Liberian president was basically rewarded by the British and French for kicking the UNIA out, for neutralizing this threat to colonialism.
And then Firestone Rubber moves in, on the land Garvey wanted.
Exactly. Soon after the UNIA was ousted, Firestone got this huge concession leasing land that had apparently been considered for Garvey's project. It strongly suggests powerful economic interests were also at play, working against Garvey's vision for black self-sufficiency in Africa.
The colonial powers definitely saw him as a threat. The propaganda campaign against him sounds intense.
It was vicious and calculated. Using his trial testimony about that yacht, the Kanawha, British interests spread rumors among Africans that Garvey was this immoral guy using black people's money for a palatial yacht with a harem.
Just completely fabricated.
Totally false, designed to discredit him. After his conviction, they spread the word he was a common criminal who robbed his own people. And then, as we said, banning the Negro World, screening travelers for UNIA ties, it was a systematic effort to crush the movement internationally.
So with Garvey imprisoned, then deported, the finances wrecked, international doors slammed shut, opposition from within and without. The UNIA started to fade.
It inevitably splintered and staggered. Without his direct leadership, his charisma, his fundraising ability, it lost its center. The conviction and the Black Star Line mess destroyed credibility and trust for many. Legal fees drained what little money was left. Assets were seized.
And politically blocked, too. Couldn't even buy ships for his next venture.
Right. He tried to start the Black Cross Navigation and Trading Company, but the U.S. Shipping Board refused to sell him ships, citing the previous problems. And with Liberia closed off, the whole back-to-Africa colonization plan was effectively dead in the water.
But Garvey himself didn't just give up, even after deportation.
Never. He remained indomitable. Kept organizing from Jamaica, then moved to London, set up a European HQ in Paris, still trying to get that League of Nations mandate for African colonies in 1928. Still giving speeches, promoting pride. He even got into legal trouble again in Jamaica for contempt of court over his political activities there. The man just didn't quit. But the global movement, without him fully at the helm, struggled to maintain its initial momentum and unity.
So when we look back at Marcus Garvey, he's just such a complex figure, isn't he? The opinions are all over the map.
Completely. The sources talk about this confusion of terms. On one side, blackest denunciation, people calling him a con man, a demagogue, an egomaniac.
Really harsh criticism.
But on the other side, rosiest approbation, hailed as the greatest organizer, a prophet, a visionary. The reactions are just incredibly strong both ways.
What's undeniable, though, is the impact he had on ordinary people at the time.
Absolutely. His message, uncompromising as it was, met a desperate need. The UNIO truly was the first true mass movement among Negroes in the United States.
Yeah.
He tapped into the dreams of millions in a way nobody else had before or arguably since.
And his influence lingered, even on those who opposed him, like A. Philip Randolph.
That's a fascinating point. Randolph, who fought Garvey so hard, later admitted Garvey had indirectly influenced black leadership by just showing the power of mass organization. That Garvey magic success formula, the bold words, the spectacle, the audacious dream, it left a lasting imprint, a kind of model for mobilization.
And his image, his legacy, has seen a real resurgence over time, hasn't it? Especially in Jamaica.
Oh, in Jamaica, it's a complete turnaround. He's gone from controversial figure to national icon. A black George Washington, father of independence, streets named after him, statues, his body brought back for a national shrine.
Jamaica's first national hero.
The highest honor. They even created the Marcus Garvey Prize for Human Rights, gave the first one to Martin Luther King Jr.'s widow. And talk about symbolism, plans to put his face on the currency instead of the Queen's. His vindication in Jamaica seems total.
What about elsewhere, like the U.S.?
Less spectacular, maybe, but definitely a growing interest, especially from the Black Power era onwards. People started invoking his name again, rediscovering his ideas about self-reliance, pride, Pan-Africanism.
And his widow played a huge role in keeping his ideas alive.
Amy Jacques Garvey was crucial, absolutely tireless. She wrote books like Garvey and Garveyism, Black Power in America. She reprinted his own philosophy and opinions, keeping his words accessible. She traveled, spoke, was honored in newly independent African nations.
Like Ghana, reviewing their new Black Star Line.
Exactly. Imagine that moment in 1960, seeing Ghana's national shipping line, named after her husband's original tragic venture. A powerful symbol of his enduring vision, even realized by others.
It really feels like his own words, that farewell message from prison, turned out to be prophetic.
You cannot crucify a principle. You cannot nail the souls of men to a cross. You cannot imprison it. You cannot bury it. It's incredibly powerful. He believed the idea, the spirit he'd ignited, was unstoppable.
The soul of the movement will not be extinguished. And arguably, it hasn't been.
It really hasn't. His ideas keep resurfacing, keep resonating.
So for you listening today, maybe the question is, how do Garvey's ideas, radical self-reliance, the focus on identity, the dream of an independent Africa, how do they echo now in our conversations about systemic racism, about empowerment, about global Black identity?
Yeah, what can we learn from his incredible successes in mobilization, but also from his struggles, his controversies, his ultimate downfall? Navigating that world of intense prejudice, the internal divisions, the external opposition.
Are there lessons there for movements today? How do we pursue dignity and self-determination in our own time? Garvey's story, his complex legacy, it doesn't offer easy answers, does it?
Not at all.
Oh.
But it definitely makes you think. It continues to challenge and provoke even a century later.